It's time, for Dapper Dino!
Okay, so hello and welcome back to my Unity tutorial. This video will be going over the Animator and calling functions from animations and also using parameters in animations. So I'm going to be using the simple scene that I've already set up. The UI isn't necessary for this. Just make sure you have a floor and a cube and that'll be simple enough. Now the first thing we want to do is we want to make it so these objects have physics, because at the moment nothing will happen. Well, this isn't necessary, but I'm going to do it anyway. So as you can see, this box has a box collider, which means, as you may guess, it collides with other colliders. So this little green outline around the box shows where the collider boundaries are, and you can actually change these if you want them to be different to the shape, but you know, for this we want it to be the shape itself. And this is trigger box we want to be left unchecked, because if we check it and then run the game, it will be able to go through other objects because it won't be it won't have a collision detection or a trigger detection. And then this floor thing, whatever we're going to call it down here, also has the outline and it is not a trigger either. So these objects will physically collide and not be inside each other, they'll push out. Now we want this object here to have physics applied. So we're going to add a component. We're going to search rigid body and make sure you select rigid body, not rigid body 2D, because that'll work only for 2D games. So as you see, you've got the values here, mass, drag, all the other values for it. All we want to do is make sure gravity is checked, and I'm going to pull the object up and press play. As you can see, the object falls down to the ground and stops. That's perfect. So now this object is affected by gravity. So we'll place it back onto the floor, and we're going to now sort out the animation. So let's minimize these. There we go. Okay, I'm going to search for Animator. That means that the object can be animated, but it requires some other parts. So down here in our assets, we're going to right-click, create a new Animator controller. Now what that means is it's a flowchart system where you put your animations in for the object, and this controls what animation it's in at what time and transitions and everything like that. So I'll show you that in a second. So we'll just call it cube animation, and it's just there for now. But to make it use on the cube, I don't know if you can just drag it like that. Yeah, you can. You can drag it there, drag it up here. You can click on the little circle. Anything works. And obviously that means now this cube has this animator attached. So if we click on animator, this is the animator for the cube, and if we see here entry, this is where the flowchart is started from when this cube is created, and exit is if you want it to leave the whole subroutine, but in most cases you don't want it to exit. Okay, so with our cube we'll start off with a simple animation. So we're going to right click, create new animation, and we'll call it idle. I always like making an idle state that you can go back to. I'm not sure if it's necessary, but I feel like it's a good practice to get into. So we'll drag idle into here, and as you can see, it's made a line from entry because it's the first one we've put in. And what it means is as soon as this starts, it'll go to idle. And we want idle, if you click on it down here, to be a loop, or click loop time, which means when this animation ends, it will just keep replaying it until it's told otherwise. If you don't do this, then it will just stop. So we're going to make the animation idle. I'm going to click on animation down here, or if you haven't got the window, you click on window and go down to animation, and there it is. Now if we click on the cube, we see we can now click add property. So we click on add property, and it shows you what the animator can control. So we want to change, let's say for idle, we don't want to change anything, so you could leave this blank, but because I'm stupid, I just like having the things I'm going to end up changing in other scripts, having them static here, so I can copy the static keyframes. It helps. So this means it has a 60 frame animation in a second. So as you can see here, it goes up in frames, 5, 10, 15, 20, and at the end it's at 55, 60, but where it says 60, it just says 1, which means 1 second, 1 full cycle. So as you can see, if I play the animation, nothing happens because it's idle, obviously. And now we want to make a new animation, so we'll click create new clip, or well, you could also just create them here ready. So create new animation, we'll call it let's just put move up. You can do whatever you want. And then we'll make a move right as well. Why not? You can do whatever you want here. You don't have to copy me. This is just for demonstrational purposes. So now if you go back to the animator, let's say we want an animation that goes from idle, it moves right, and then it moves up, and then it goes back to idle. Now the way to do this is to have it go from idle to move right. So you click on make transition, which means it means it's allowed to go from idle to move right. If you don't make that, it can never go between those two. And let's say we want it to go from move right back to idle. We want it to be allowed. We also want to go from idle to move up, and we want to go from move up to idle. And do we want to go from move right to move up? Let's make it so we can do that. Okay, so now we've got a freeway thing where we can go basically from anywhere to anywhere. We can go between any of these. Now, at the moment, this doesn't really do anything. I think first of all, we'll make the animations. So if we go back here and click on the cube and animation, you see here we've got the two new ones. So move up. What we'll do is we'll make it so that at the first frame, we'll add a property and transform. Well, actually, what I'll do is I'll go to the idle, and you see I drag over these keyframes, copy, Control-C, and paste here. So here we go. We've already got the things we want to change, and they're at the start here. So over the course of 1 second, we want it to be, let's say, well, if we click record here, it means that any change we do in the editor, it will record the keyframe down here. So we're at 1 second into the animation, and this has turned red now, meaning any of these values we change will be recorded as a keyframe. So if we now drag this up, and then go back to start, click here and press play, see it moves up, up, but at the end it just goes back to the start because it doesn't know what to do now. So what we'll do is, sorry, I'm gonna change, well, stop recording first, then we're gonna go back here and we're gonna change move right. We're just gonna call it move down because I think that's what we'll stick to for now. Animator. We should probably rename this. It doesn't actually matter, but for the sake of this. So let's say it goes from idle to move up. How do I want this to go? I don't want it to go from move up. Wait, do I want it to do that? So it's going to be on the floor. It's going to move up, and then it's going to move down and go back to idle. We don't want idle to move down, and we don't want, but we, yeah, that's what we want. So it has to move up, and then when it's up in the air, it can either move down. Well, yeah, it has to move down, but then when it's down on the ground, it can move back up again. No, that's not necessary. We'll just keep it simply so it goes idle to move up to move down. There we go. So it's a simple cycle of up, down, stop, up, down, stop, up, down, stop. So let's go make the move down. So for move down, at the start of the animation, we need to make sure it's here. So we'll copy the keyframes from the end of move up, and we'll put them at the start of move down. And then obviously if we go back to idle and get the idle keyframes, and we can go and put them at the end of move down. Oops, I've clicked off cube. We go to the end of move down. Why is it not letting me change this? There are two audio lists. Nah, that's not matter. What have I done with this move down? That's odd. So idle's working, move up's working, move down is not working. Okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to get the idle keyframes for this. Move down, and we want it to end here. It's working now, for some reason it wasn't. And then obviously move up. We want to copy these and put these here. What the hell's going on? It zoomed out for some reason. I think that's the problem. It's a bit silly. 0 frames, paste. So this animation goes down. Yeah, simple. Okay, that's a bit odd. I don't know why it was zooming out like that. So now we've got the 3 animations. We've got the idle on the floor, moving up, and then moving down, and then back to idle. So now we've made the animations. We probably want to just revert it back to idle so it looks right in the game scene. Now on the cube, we can make some more code that controls the animator. Because at the moment, if you press play, it might actually work. It might do some animation, but it's uncontrolled. Just moves up and down. Because if you see on the animator here, it shows you it's going move up, down, idle, move up, down, idle, and so on. We don't really want that. So first of all, we're going to make it so that we can loop these as well, so that we can stay up in the air. Oh, actually, no, that won't work, because that would just... no. We're going to now change the parameters in here. Now, what that means is, it means what conditions are necessary to be moving up and down. At the moment, it's only on exit time, which means, if you see here, it's got an exit time of 0.75 seconds with a transition time of 0.25, which adds up to 1 second, or 1 animation. So basically, it means after doing this animation, after you're 3/4 through, it will then smoothly transition into the other one for 0.25 seconds. If we click on idle to move up, when do we want that to happen? We don't want it to happen after a certain amount of time, so we'll disable as exit time. We don't want a transition. And if we see down here, there's conditions, but it's empty. Now we're going to do the same for the other one, so let's just turn off move up to move down. Oh no, now we want an exit time for this one, which means that we want, after it's done 1 cycle of move up, it goes to the next one. So get rid of the transition. We want 1, this isn't 1 second, this is 1 cycle. And close that. So that means after this is finished, it'll move on to this one. It'll move down, it goes back to idle. So we want this to happen after 1 second as well. So let's put that to 1. We don't want a transition time really. You might want to do that on certain animations, but not for simple ones like this. Now, the only condition we need to make here, okay, so we'll click plus, and as you can see, it says parameter does not exist. There's no parameters, empty. So we're going to make a new one up here. So now you can make either, you know, a float, an int, a bool, or a trigger. For the sake of this, we could do it with any, but we're going to use either a bool or a trigger. So a bool will be like more of a toggle, whereas a trigger will be when something happens, it sets off and does it once. So we'll do a boolean, and we'll call it is animating. Yep, spell it right. And now it's down here. So that means that this transition will happen whenever is animating is equal to true. And we have no way really of setting that to true at the moment. We could just check this little box here, but that's not a good way of doing it, because you won't be able to do that in game. What was it saying? The cube animation transition in state idle use parameter which does not exist. That was because, well, that'll go away now. It's because I tried to give it a condition without having one existing, but now it exists. So now we'll make some new code for the cube. So if we add component onto the cube and we call it cube animation, new script. And now is probably a good time to sort out our folders, our assets. So we'll create folders. We'll create one called animations, and we'll put in this. We'll get these 4 and put them in animations. And we'll make another one for scripts. That's all we really need right now. Scripts. And we'll put this and this into here. So on here, you see we've got the cube animation script. So we're going to double click on it and open it in Visual Studio. That should only be 1 second, hopefully. Okay, so now this code is going to be taking care of when the transition happens, and we could make some input to make the animation happen. That's quite simple. So we'll get rid of these for now. I always just like starting fresh. So what do we need in this code? So we need some way of speaking, I guess, to the animator. So we need to have we could have a public or a private. Now I feel like for this it's a good practice to use a private animator, because sometimes you might not be able to drag things in that you want to respond to. So using private, it lets you access stuff via code. So I have a private animator, make sure you don't do animation, you want an animator, and we'll call it, you know, animator. And what else do we want? We'll have a private boolean called is animating equals false, because by default we want it to be false. And that's basically it. Now void start, we'll make a start where in this start we want to find the animator. Now obviously in the game scene you can see it's right next to it, but the way we want it to work is we want it to be, well, basically all these things such as animator, rigid body, mesh renderer, these are all components. So what we can do is we can get component and we can put the component in, so animator. But that doesn't do anything. Also, you do need open and closed brackets for it to run that. But doing that doesn't mean anything. We need to assign it somewhere. So we made a private animator up here called animator. So animator equals, and there we go. So this variable animator here is referring to this animator over here. And now what we can do is we can go into our void update. I didn't really have to delete them, but I just have a habit of doing it at the start, because sometimes you don't use them, but most of the time you do. Anyway, so in the void update, we'll make it so that we can use user input to trigger this animation. So, like for example, in the game you might want spacebar on jump, and when you press spacebar it does a jump animation, for example. So we'll have if bracket input dot get key down, yep. And what key do we want? We want key code dot, I don't know, you can put where you want here, space, I'll do spacebar. So basically if in that frame you press the spacebar button, it will set yes, so sorry, animator, so we're referring to the animator here that we've got, dot set bool. Now as you see back in the animator here, we called it is animating. So in these brackets here, it takes in the ID of the thing and then a value, a boolean value, true or false. So, and you also need to use it as a string here. You put in speech marks to name it. So is animating, which is what I called it here, is animating, comma, and then the boolean, which is true or false. So I want to set it to true. And then I'll end that. So that's simply when I press spacebar, it sets that boolean to true. And then I'll have another if here. And actually, for the sake of time, I'll just copy and paste this. And I'll just change what I need to change. So I could also put else if, because this only needs to be checked if this one is not. Wait, sorry, no. I do need this one to be checked as well. So, and, because we want it to be a toggle. So up here we've got the boolean is animating, which I probably shouldn't have named the same as this, but it'll work. It's just for the sake of reading, it's quite confusing this way. But is animating. So we want it to be, it sets it to true, and then put this false. It sets it to true if it's false, and it sets it to false if it's true, so it turns it on and off. So if not is animating, and here we'll have is animating, do this. But this animating boolean never gets changed. So after we have changed the animator, you then want to set is animating equal to true, because it is animating. And then here is animating equal to false. Now, I don't know if anyone's noticed this, but there could be a problem here because it's reading, when code is run, it's read from top to bottom. So here it's checking, did you press spacebar this frame? And is it not animating? Which it isn't. So it does this, and it sets animator to true. Is animating to true. But then it keeps reading down. If you press the spacebar this frame, which you did, and it is animating, which it is because it's been set to true, then it'll do this. So this will basically be negated by this. So this is why, actually I said earlier, you do want an else if, which means this code only gets run if this doesn't. If this doesn't. But because this is getting run, this won't, which is fine. So this will fix it. If you miss out the else, there could be problems. So now let's go back in here into the scene view and press play. Let's see what happens, assuming I haven't made any mistakes. So it's still. We press spacebar, and it goes up, and it comes down, up, down, and press spacebar again, turns it off. So now it stops when it finished the animation. You could make it so it interrupts the animation, but at the moment I want it to finish. So start, stop, start, stop, and obviously it waits till it finished. So that works. Yeah, that works completely actually. There's one last thing I want to do with the animator this video. Ask for more animator videos if you want. I can go more in depth, but what I'll do is I'll make it so we have a new function down here we'll make called void say hello. I'll keep it simple, and we could just have it debug.log hello. And at the moment, let me just check what's going on in the console, because I was printing some other stuff from another script. Yeah, so at the moment it says your name is David and 400, and there's no hello there. And I'm getting this error, but it's not an error, it's not having any problems, it's just warning me that there's 2 audio listeners. And obviously an audio listener is like, let's say you're playing a first person shooter and you're in the perspective of this camera here. You'll hear audio as if you're in the perspective of that camera. So if there's audio behind you or to the right or to the left, you'll hear it in that way. But because we added another camera last video for this little view here, it has its own audio listener. So we could just go into the inspector down here to audio listener and just remove that component. We don't want this one to be able to hear. No, I'll fix it. So when we press play now, even though I made a function here called say hello that debugs to the console hello, it doesn't happen because it's never run. And we could just make that happen. But what if we only want it to happen when, well, let's say it only wants to happen at the peak of the going up and down. That's the only time I want it to happen. What you can do is you could go into an animation, so the move up, and as you can see across the animation it moves up, and let's say at the last keyframe right at the top of the animation we want it to run it then. There's a simple way of going about this, and you click this little marker here, you click add event, and it adds a little marker on the timeline down here. If you go into the inspector, here we go, no function selected. Let's click on that, and now our function we made is in this options thing here, which is say hello, which just means that when the animator gets to this point here, it will run that function. So if we go into game and press play, and then we press spacebar, toggle on, reaches the top, hello, hello, hello.